We're going to be multiplying polynomials today. So yeah, I don't need that. We're not even going to worry about that. There are two ways that you can multiply polynomials. The first way to multiply polynomials is using what is called the box method or area method. What you do is you draw a box or a rectangle, and you take this first polynomial, which is called a binomial, you write it here, and then you take the second binomial and you write it, actually I'm not going to write it like that, I'm going to write it like this. And what you do is you take the 2x and you multiply it by the x, and you get 2x squared. Then you take the 3 and you multiply it by the x and get 3x. You take the 2x and multiply it by -3 and get -6x. And last but not least, you take the 3 times the -3 and get -9. If you look at this, you should be able to see that right here we have like terms. So we need to combine our like terms. So I write down the 2x squared from the first box. Then I combine like terms. 3x minus 6x will get me -3x. And then you write -9. Okay, I'm going to come down to this one. Again, (4x minus 3) x plus 7. I take 4x and I multiply it by x. I get 4x squared. I take -3 and I multiply it by x and I get -3x. I take 4x and I multiply it by 7 and I get 28x. And then 7 times -3 gets -21. Again, I take that and I combine like terms, so I get 4x squared plus 25x minus 21. Those two examples were binomials times binomial. Right here I have a binomial times a trinomial. Okay? So I'm going to take a binomial and multiply it by a trinomial. So x times x squared gets x to the third. -3 times x squared gets -3x squared. X times 2x will get 2x squared. -3 times 2x will get -6x. And x times -6 would get -6x. And last but not least, -3 times -6 is +18. Why I wrote the plus sign, I don't know. Again, you notice these two are like terms and these two are like terms. So x to the third, -3x squared plus 2x squared gets -x squared. -6x minus 6x is -12x plus 18. Now I showed you the box method for these three, but you don't have to use the box method. You could be using just distributive property. You could just be using the distributive property. So I'm going to show you this first one, this one right here, as the distributive property. So I take 2x and I multiply it by x. I would still get 2x squared. I might multiply the 2x by the -3 and I would get -6x. I take the 3 and multiply it by the x and get 3x. And the 3 times the -3 and get -9. Now, if you compare that to what do you have in the box on the left-hand side, they're the exact same thing. So that means I'm going to take 2x squared minus 6x minus 9, which is the same answer that I got. So you could do it either way. It doesn't matter which way you do it. It will still work either way. On this one, I take the first two, and I get 4x squared. I take the outer ones, and I get 28x. I take the innards, and I get negative 3x. And then I take the lasts, and I get negative 21. I combine like terms. And I get 4x squared plus 25x minus 21. Is that the same thing that I got over here? That is the same thing I got, whether I did it box method or whether I did it distributive property. It does not matter which way you do it. Okay, last but certainly not least, for the distributive property, again, you do the exact same thing. When you do this, you just do it more times. So I'm going to take x, I'm going to take x, multiply it by x squared. Get x to the third. Take x and multiply it by 2x and get 2x squared. Take x and multiply it by negative 6. Get negative 6x. Then I take the negative 3 times x squared and get negative 3x squared. Negative 3 times 2x and get negative 6x. Last but not least, I take negative 3, I multiply it by negative 6, and I get 18. Then I need to combine like terms. This has an x squared, this has an x squared. This has an x, this has an x. If you look on the box over here on this side, I get the exact same thing. Now I just have to combine my like terms like I was doing on the one before that. I'm going to make it bigger again. So I get x to the third. Then I would get negative x squared, negative 12x plus 18. Okay? Sorry, I'm trying to do this. Do I get the exact same thing? I do get the exact same thing. Now, this next part that we're going to do on this is we multiplied the binomials. Now we need to go backwards. We need to go the opposite direction. So I'm actually going to look up here at when I multiplied these two together, I have a binomial times a binomial. When I multiplied that together, I actually got 4 terms. I got the 2x squared, the 3x, the negative 6x, and the negative 9. Then to get this middle term right here, to get that middle term right there, I added these two in the middle together. So that's what we're going to be doing down here. We are going to be factoring, we are going to factor. This is called ax squared plus bx plus c. And we're going to do something that has they're not weird terms, they're just different terms than what you've probably used to hearing. And it's not a bad thing, it's just maybe new to you. So we're going to do what's called the x method. We're going to do what's called the x method. So we're going to take this trinomial and we're going to make it into something that has 4 terms in it. The very first thing we have to do, and I'm going to make an x off to the side here, is we're going to multiply a and c together, and we're going to put b down here. So when I do that, when I multiply A and C together, that gets me 18. I'm multiplying A and C together. That gets me 18. Then I'm going to write B down. B is what is in front of the X. Now, notice how I multiplied A and C together. So we have to figure out the factors of 18 that add to 9. Okay, so what are the factors of 18? Well, 1 and 18. 1 times 18 is 18. Negative 1 times negative 18 is also 18. 2 times 9, negative 2 times negative 9. 3 times 6, negative 3 times negative 6. Those are all the factors of 18. What can you multiply together that's going to get you 18? Those are all of our choices. Now, we need to figure out when you add them together. I'm going to change the color here. If I add these together, which one comes out to 9? So 1 plus 18, that would get 19. 2 plus 9 would get you 11. 3 plus 6, oh, that would get me 9. So I'm going to take my 3 and my 6 and write them here. All I did was write what the factors are, factors of 18 that add to 9, and I'm going to put them on the side. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to rewrite the trinomial 2x squared plus 9x plus 9 as a 4-term polynomial. So I'm going to write the first one down. I'm going to write the last one down. But then I'm going to put in the 3x plus the 6x. And some people are like, where'd that come from? Well, do you see this is 9x? 3x plus 6x gets us the 9x. So now we have to factor by grouping. So I'm going to put a line, actually I'm going to use the red. Put a line right here, and I'm going to focus, get rid of that, oops. I'm just getting rid of the line underneath. I'm going to focus on the first two. I'm focusing on the first two. I'm looking at these two right here, and what do they have in common? The only thing that they have in common is an x. So I take out an x. When I take out an x, I have 2x left over, and I have a 3. So think about it this way. If I was to multiply this back through, would I get this right here? And I would. So now I look at the second part, okay? And I need to write down that plus sign. If it was a negative, I'd write it down a negative, but I'm not factoring out a negative. I'm just leaving it as is. Now, I look at this part. What do these two have in common? They have a 3 in common. 6x divided by 3 would get me 2x. 9 divided by 3 would get me 3. So if I was to multiply this back through, would I get this right here? I would. Now let's look at this. I'm still factoring. Do you notice that this set of parentheses and this set of parentheses are exactly the same? If they are exactly the same, I'm going to write that out front. I factored it out. Then I write what's left over. What is left over? On the first term, I have x. The second term, I have x plus 3. Okay, so we're going to do the exact same thing that we did just now. Again, I need AC here, and I need B. So I'm going to take the first and the last, and I'm going to multiply those together and get -6. Then the B value goes down below. So what are the factors of -6 that add to -5? So if I have 1, that would be 1 and -6, because 1 times -6 gets me -6. I also have -1 and +6. I have I like to do it in a certain order. 2 times -3, or -2 and 3. It doesn't matter which order you do it in, I just do it that way. So then I'm going to add them together. So if I was to add these together, which ones come out to -5? 1 plus -6. Oh, look at that. You can do all the rest of them, but you've already found that this is the set that comes up with the -5. So 1 and -6. So again, I write down the first term as is and the last term as is. I didn't change the first term or the last term. It's the middle term that I am changing. So for you guys right now, I'm going to write the 1, but normally you don't write that 1 in front of the x. But just for right now, so you can see that the 1 is right here, the -6 is right here. They add together and they would get this -5. So now I'm going to look at the first two. What do those first two have in common? They have an x in common. Both of those terms have an x. So 3x squared divided by x would get 3x. 1x divided by x would get me 1. Then I look at the second one. That first thing is a negative sign, so I'm taking out a negative. Then I look at this. What do they have in common? They both get a 2. But we're factoring out a -2. So -6x divided by -2 is going to get me a +3x. Because remember, when you multiply that back through, it has to come out to a -6. So -2 times 3x would get us that -6x. Then -2 divided by -2 is 1. So multiply this. Would I end up with the -2? I would. So beautiful. Okay, now I'm going to get rid of this part right here. Oh, I want a different color. Now, if I look at this, you'll notice I have this in common with this. They're exactly the same, so I'm going to write this down. What we're doing is factoring this out. We're dividing the first term and dividing the second term by that. And we're looking for what is left over. And we have an x minus 2 left over. Okay, doing the same thing here. We're multiplying the 2 and the -18 together to get -36. It needs to add together to get -5. So what are the factors of negative 36 that add to negative 5. So now I'm going to find my factors. I don't know, let's do pink. So the factors of negative 36. So 1 and negative 36, or negative 1 and positive 36. 2 goes into it, negative 18. People are like, how'd you know that? Well, isn't that what we multiplied here in the first place to get that? Or negative 2 and positive 18. 3 goes in, negative 12 times. So negative 3 and positive 12. 4 goes in for negative 9, negative 4 and 9. And then some people forget this one, 6 and negative 6. So now we need to figure out which ones, when we add them together, are going to come up with negative 5. So I would add all of these together. Now, you don't really have to add every single one of them. Some of you are like, oh, I see it off the top of my head. Well, then go straight to it. It doesn't matter. If I add these two together, I get negative 35. I add these two together, I get negative 16. This would be negative 9. Oh, look at that. That's negative 5. So these are the two that I would be using. So 4 and negative 9. Does it matter which order you put the 4 and the negative 9? No. I just put it in the same order I wrote it before. It doesn't matter. So I'm going to write down my first term as is and my last term as is. Then I'm going to use these two right here to make my middle terms, because these two right here have to add together to get this right here. So, change my color. I look at the first two. Look at these two right here. What do they have in common? Oh, not only do they have an x in common, but they actually have a 2 in common also. So I'm going to take out a 2x. That means I'm dividing out a 2x. So 2x squared divided by 2x is going to be x. 4x divided by 2x is going to be 2. Remembering that if I was to multiply this back through, I would want to get this right here. So now I'm going to look over here. Well, I'm starting off with a negative, so I need to write that negative down. What do they have in common? They have a 9. They have a negative 9 in common. So if I divide negative 9x by negative 9, I get a positive x. If I divide negative 9 or negative 18 by negative 9, I would get a positive 2. So if I multiply that back through, will I get this right here? And yes, I would. So now I look at this. This part right here and this part right here are the same. I write it out front. They now go away because I just factored it out, and I'm left over with 2x minus 9. And last but not least, I want to do this again, and I'm just going to go ahead and use this. I would get negative 30 and would add to 1 because there's an invisible 1 right there. What are my factors of negative 30? Well, I have 1 and negative 30, 2 and negative 15, 3 and negative 10, 4 doesn't go in, 5 and negative 6. Or it could have been negative 1 and 30, negative 2 and 15, negative 3 and negative 10, or negative 5 and 6. And which ones, when you add them together, are going to end up getting negative 1. Oh, that's negative 1. We need a positive 1. Ooh, that should have been positive. Oops, I made a boo-boo. Okay, so it ends up being negative 5 and 6. So I write down the first term and the last term as is. I replace the middle term. I look at the first two. What do they have in common? They have an x. So I get 3x minus 5. The second two, what do they have in common? Oopsie daisy. Plus sign, but they have a 2 in common. 6x divided by 2 is going to get 3x. Negative 10 divided by 2 is going to get negative 5. This right here is the same as this right here, so I write it out front. The leftovers, x plus 2.